derivatives trading involves substantial risk of loss and is not suitable for all investors. Past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results.
So stressful when the world's on fire. Good God. I can't look at this, guys. Like, my strategy is you buy it and you hope that you gotta get spotted. Yeah, but we all think you're crazy. You don't fight this. No way. The markets are freaking out and you don't think that anything is wrong? Come back tomorrow and I'll lose it all. Should be fun.
Good morning, everybody. Well, it is Tuesday. We got a Federal Reserve meeting tomorrow. My lights are not turning on all the way for some reason. I have to figure that out. Wonder if a child got back there and unplugged it. But let's go look at the charts first, shall we? Okay, so in ZN here, they retraced, the overnight downside action, ended the day up, kind of a little bit of a curious rise, but it was just kind of a gentle one. Now here this morning, they're selling off again. In the S&P 500, still reeling from that downside last Friday. Oil just trudging along and starting to head up to 92. Oh, oil. Man, at this rate, we'll be at $100 in no time. Gold and silver actually rising here as well. So to be seeing yields rising and gold and silver rising at the same time is a little concerning. Are we actually going to see this time where gold and silver actually do protect you from inflation? That would be interesting. Here's silver. Copper taking a bit of a plunge this morning. So gold and silver going opposite the rest of the metals complex is also a little odd. And then we come over here, Bitcoin pumping again this morning. There's all sorts of like news about Binance and stuff going on. Like I don't trust this movement in Bitcoin at all. Although apparently Michael Saylor is buying, so there's that. Also the dollar. Actually, the dollar under a little bit of pressure this morning and heading down to 104.33. So curious. And let's see here. If we come over and look at news, we do have some Canadian news at the bottom of the hour here. We're going to get U.S. building permits and housing starts here in about 2 minutes. Bank of Canada, CPI. And there is a 20-year auction at 11. So let's come back over here. Can you believe it's the 19th already? UAW is to announce new strikes on Friday if progress is not made. Potential for Canadian strikes at Ford facilities as well. Yeah, the more that I hear, I haven't been reading too deeply into what's going on with the strikes, but every time that I read a headline about like what the UAW is demanding and everything, the more I'm like, we're screwed. Oops. I always forget to turn the speakers off. I just need like a physical mixer or something that's in front of me. Anyways, like the last thing I heard is that they want like a 40% pay raise with a 4-day work week, like 32-hour work week. It's just like, hey, I don't think that's necessarily gonna work, especially not in the auto industry. Like a 4-day work week might make sense for certain desk jobs. I don't think it would make sense for mine. Okay, but I definitely don't think it makes sense for like a manufacturing facility. Unless you're just gonna like hire more people, I guess. Okay, so here we go. Looks like they're pulling pretty aggressively for the housing numbers, so this should be interesting. We are getting a pretty decent slew of data when you count the Canadian numbers. Okay. Building permits, higher than expected, 1.543. Housing starts change month over month. Was expected to be negative spot 9, and it was negative 11 spot 3? Well, that seems unexpected. I would think that the treasuries would buy on that number, but they're not reacting too strongly yet. Okay, I'm going to check on this light, okay? It's still not coming up. We would go to a commercial real quick. Okay. So, oh, you know, we should probably pay attention to the CPI. Canadian CPI month over month, spot 4 versus spot 2. What about core CPI month over month, spot 1? I don't know if that's actually a huge deal. They do seem to be moving on it though. Anyways, good morning, Octavius. Good morning, Dom Dom. That's funny. Funny name. I like it. I like it. Well, I don't see that news as being super overtly hawkish, but you know, the action, especially over the last hour, has been to the downside. It's a big bid. Yeah, there is a big bid at 25. How long has that been there for? Do we know? Here, let's pull up our Vista chart. We should be able to see, right? No, maybe not. Don't think I have this one saving the data, unfortunately. And there's the treasuries come back up to the 11. And an iceberg at 10.5. I don't know about this one, guys. So off of the open, there was about 10,000 contracts that sold the open in the 10-year. And a little bit of follow through off of that news, but price not really responding too strongly to it. So I feel like I'm getting mixed signals. I do have a strong enough of a sell flow to say that there is a meta order sell in here, but I'm also seeing some of the action and so forth not really reacting to it too strongly, and the Treasury is suggesting that we're still going to be relatively range bound until after the Federal Reserve meeting tomorrow. Octavia says it's been there since 8:23. Okay. So shortly before the news. Well, shortly after the open. You can see there seems to be a little bit of gravity there at 11 that they're having a hard time getting away from. You know, I feel like my cynicism about society is starting to get to me, because like one of the things that I think about is that you know, we talk about the large impact of orders. Orders have a strong impact. And so when you think about, that's kind of like a flaw, I would say, or an inefficiency in capitalism as a whole. Basically, like if everybody behaves the way that they're supposed to, capitalism works very well. But eventually, certain big players kind of realize that they can kind of screw with things a little bit, right? They can buy things and try and create momentum with it and try and get everybody else to buy it. Or even better yet, you get on social media and use social media to get everybody excited about it. And so what I've found is that like the biggest tool that they have against us, the thing to manipulate us and to get us to do things that aren't necessarily within our interest, is attention. Right? Like if something is clearly sitting there in front of you and is obvious, you don't have to spend a whole lot of time telling people about it, right? Because they know it's there. They're like dealing with it directly. So when you have to push something to people, through media, sending it to them over and over again, it's because it's either something that's not really obvious to people, or because it's something that's not really actually in their best interests. So every time that I start to see a narrative and it's getting pushed from anywhere, I'm just like, I should probably ignore this. So the narrative that I'm seeing today, top story on Zero Hedge, is they were laughing. Rogue gang of teens brutally beat gas station clerk in lawless Seattle. And there was another story a few days ago about the teens intentionally ran over a man on a bike, killing him. And these are both brutal crimes, but I also kind of like, I think, yeah, that was in Las Vegas. I think something like that happens every year, though, doesn't it? Yeah. He was a retired, although I would note that we don't have any evidence to suggest that they knew who he was. That's what I think is shocking about it, is that they just randomly decided to run a guy over and then recorded it and put on social media and thought that that would be a great idea. But the callousness of filming it, yes. Well, randomly picking a person and then the callousness. I wouldn't necessarily say that that's not the first time, because there was another story a couple of months ago. What was it? Where they had posted it to social media, and that's basically what got them in trouble. What do you mean by they pit maneuvered a random car? Anyways, I'm seeing the narrative being set before it, and I'm sitting here like, is this a narrative that is actually beneficial to me as an individual person? Pit maneuver is how cops stop car chases. They nudge the back corner of the car and it disables the exit. Oh, I see. The obvious. So the question is, how big of a deal is it really? Right? Well, for the purpose of the discussion, that the issue that I'm grappling with here, right? The question is, how serious of a thing is it? Is this really an issue that is deserving of my time and attention? Well, one question would be, how real is it? Is this really actually a real problem, or are we just like cherry picking two instances of a crime and it's not really very indicative of like something larger that's going on? But it seems to me that violent crime is on the rise. That it's on the rise after having a very long period of declining violence in the United States, right? You're in high income, mostly white areas, so it's not really something you have to worry about. That could be as well. Or I mean, that's probably true. But, so from the perspective of, if I'm a right-wing person and I'm trying to put narratives out to try and influence the electorate to vote a certain way, then of course I would want people to think that lawlessness is getting out of control so that people are more likely to vote in law and order candidates that are more likely to be conservative, right? So that would be why you would be pushing the narrative. But it's not always easy to sort out what is just the narrative and what is actually truly a problem and deserving of my time and attention. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Because I can sort out what they're going to do, because they think it's good for them ideologically. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not a thing or that it's not a problem. Sometimes I can, I give you an example of the opposite here, okay? Because a lot of people on the left are saying, conservatives are only talking about the transgender issue because they have nothing better to talk about. And they're trying to use that as a wedge issue to try and get more votes or something like that, right? I disagree vehemently. I think the reason why Republicans are so focused on that particular issue, although it has died off in the last month or two, but I think the reason why it's such a thing is because parents are seeing it. Like, you understand, even if it's like 1 in 100 kids, that is like enough that it touches basically everybody in the school system. So it is extremely likely that your kid knows somebody that is like quote unquote transgender, and it is very likely that, if you go to junior high, that your kid can point to a group of kids that those are the transgender kids, 100%. And there's actually, I think it's higher than a 1% chance. I think it's more like a 5% chance that you have a kid that is like adjacent to it. Well, like, let's say a 5% chance that like your kid is into that sort of a thing. And probably more like 30, 40, maybe even 60%, depending on the kid. That your kid knows a kid that's that. So it's the reason and then the whole thing is that there's like, they're saying things like, you're not allowed to tell the parents. So did you read this? This one is crazy. And again, it's like, it's one data point. So it's not like this is something that's like, it shows you this is indicative of like stuff that's happening regularly. It's just one horror case where the school didn't tell the parent that their child was identifying as transgender, and then the child ran away from home and got sex trafficked. And then after the police rescued him, there's a girl identifying as a boy. So when the police rescued him, the school teachers argued that the parents were quote unquote abusive because they didn't recognize her gender transition that they never knew about. Right. And so instead of putting them back with the parents, they put the kid in a juvenile facility for boys where the boy was sexually assaulted again in the facility. Like, just throw him right in with the predators. Oh my gosh, like super, super crazy, right? And so what are parents thinking? Yeah, what are parents thinking? The school is going to do something and confuse my child, and I'm not going to be able to do anything to protect them because I won't know what's going on. That's what parents are thinking. And it is explicitly aimed at conservative parents. They're basically saying, if you're a conservative parent and your child identifies as transgender, we don't want you to know, so that you can't do anything about it, because they think that what you'll do is be abusive. Because the child is safer in the hands of the state than with their parents. Are you kidding me? Okay. But so that's an isolated incident. But like I said, every parent in America is looking at it because they're seeing it and they're hearing about it from their kids. They're seeing it. I've experienced it. Okay, I've dealt with this, it was crazy stuff, right? And then you can tell me that like you're gonna hide stuff from me. So that is an issue that it's like in front of, like, the reason that a lot of conservative parents are concerned about this is because it's like right in front. They don't need the news to tell them, right? This increase in violence in inner cities, I need the news to tell me. It doesn't happen where I live, right? But my natural gut reaction is ignore it. Like if it's a narrative, that if I can clearly see a narrative, you know, amongst certain outlets to push a certain issue, like my first gut reaction is ignore it, you know? And I haven't seen any polling on this either. Like, what polling should we be looking at? I feel safer in my community today than I did 5 years ago. The entire global economy it's true. Because that's the whole thing, is that the biggest weapon, and I'm not even going to say that they have, because to some extent it's kind of like its own self-existent thing, okay? But the biggest thing that works against us, works against our interests in terms of having the society that we want, in terms of generating more wealth, in terms of taking care of your family, the biggest problem is attention. Attention. And so anytime that my attention is clearly, that there is a clear vie for my attention, I'm like, Wait, my answer to that would be no. Oh, that you feel safer 5 years ago than you do now? So you know what? So on Friday, I wanted to go and try out a chair, because this chair has kind of like, it's a leather chair, but like the threading is coming out on it, and it's starting to become uncomfortable. The padding is just gone and all of that. It's a really old chair. So I wanted to go and try like like the nicest chair I had heard of. And the place ended up, it was a nice place. It was a really nice place, but it was like right on the edge of the shadiest part of town. So the shadiest part of town in Salt Lake is the Rio Grande area, because there used to be the homeless shelter over there. They have since closed that homeless shelter, but there's still a lot of homeless people around in that park and so forth. And but you know, I've been around that area because I used to like flyer. Okay. I used to flyer, that's where like all the clubs were. So I used to go and flyer cars in that area. And, you know, it was like what happened was they closed the road home and it kind of dispersed it. So it's actually not as bad as it used to be. In 2020, it was really bad. Right. But I had absolutely no qualms whatsoever walking around that part of town, though. It's definitely not anywhere close to like what it is in some cities. Diversity initiatives in housing erode communities like salt on ice because they target the poor, and people think if you put poor people in nice communities that they'll stop being poor people. Well, to your point, if you go in and you put a high density housing in the middle of a rich neighborhood, and it's a really it's like subsidized housing or something like that, then yeah, all it does is just decrease the property value of everything in that area because violence goes up. Sure. And it's kind of like I said, you gotta think of culture. Culture is like the base training set that we feed into your brain when you're young. That is a guide for how you interact with society. And so this cultural value that is like it's okay to resolve interpersonal disputes with violence that kind of leads to some of these problems. Like that's ingrained into people. You got to realize it's not that they can't overcome it, but most people don't have any interest in changing. Most people don't change, right? Got 3 houses up the street, no fewer than 24 people in each house is basically an apartment complex. Yeah, sure. I don't really seen that where you take like a really what used to be a big house and you turn it into like a 4 apartment house or something like that. Each one bedroom and a kitchen. You're gonna be a billionaire? Good luck. I would love to be a billionaire. I don't think it's gonna happen for me. Maybe one of my children. And all the tenants are Section 8. And so you, as a result, you feel less safe then, huh? I mean, here's the thing. The solution is pretty simple, right? At least my view on the solution is pretty simple. Enforce the law strictly. If the law is strictly enforced, people go that would have the propensity to break the law go, "Oh, I shouldn't break the law because then I will get put in prison." And then they don't do it. And law breaking, particularly theft and violence, go down. And the people that are unwilling to follow the law end up in prison and get taken out of the community. And then that solves the problem for the people in the, for the people that are law-abiding people. Doesn't solve the problem for those people that like are unable to follow the law. And then you get into this whole thing that's like, well, but what happens when that's like a whole group of people that are, basically systemically held back by really strict law enforcement? Well, you just say follow the law, but it's more complicated than that, because some people just, they have circumstances in their lives and everything that kind of set them up to break the law. And I don't know if there's anything you can do. Like, I think that the conservative position is who cares, which I kind of rubs me the wrong way, but I don't know if there's a solution. Yeah. Oh man. They bring in a culture where crime is a status symbol? I don't know if I would go that far, but I don't think that I could. I don't think I know enough about the culture to say that. I think if we shifted from trying to rent everything to ownership, it'd be different. So what do you mean by that? Like if you couldn't rent an apartment and you could only buy apartments, you think that people would act differently because their incentives would be to retain their property values? I mean, that's a thought, because I guess I don't understand. I think where I'm kind of stuck here is I don't understand how that's practical. Like, obviously, any party, listen, the guys in Canada, the conservatives in Canada, they're the template. Republicans, just look at the conservatives in Canada and what they're saying and doing, because they've got like 60%. For young people, they've got like 60% of the vote over there. They're conservatives. Okay? And I understand that Canadian conservatives are pretty liberal, but go and listen to, what is his name? Jean-Pierre, I think? Like the conservative leader, okay? He's not talking like a liberal. He's conservative, okay? He's doing really, really well. Why? Because he's talking about how we're going to get the cost of housing down. And he has like real initiatives that would actually make a difference. But I don't know if that's the same problem. Right, but you understand too, though, that the laws that you put in place to prevent those sorts of things are one of the major reasons why we have such a housing crisis in the Western world right now, right? Because that's definitely so I don't think, I mean, maybe there are some people, but I don't think that very many rich people with houses sit there and say, I want to go and implement every law possible to enrich myself and keep poor people from owning houses. I don't think that anybody thinks of it that way, right? It's almost always under the guise of, you know, I don't want high density housing in my area because it's not appropriate for my area and it would make my family less safe. That's usually the thinking going into it, right? But then the problem is like, yeah, but where else are you going to build houses? Because you're getting to the point where, yeah, there are places to build houses, but it's like out in the boonies. It's not where people want to live. The treasuries, by the way, did continue down. Remember that 09.5 was kind of like the lower end of the range yesterday, where they had a little bit of problem. You're starting to see a decent amount of liquidity trading in this area again. So there is a little bit of support at that previous area. Who knows how much needs to sell? There was about 5,000 contracts in backwash, and now we're starting to see the selling come back. We can see how far it goes. I'm still kind of the mind that, well, maybe I should just be going short. I don't know. What I want is less urbanization. I'm honestly, I'm not sure how you resolve the cost of living crisis without some degree of high density housing. And I'd go further. A community that is like only rich people, that doesn't work very well. So here's what happens if you do that. Of course, on the very, very, very high end, it works. Where you have people that are like millionaires, because the issue that you get in a community like that is you have this really rich community, they all have kids, and then where do their kids live? Because when you're starting out and you're just out of school, even if you get a decent job out of college, and especially if you have student loans on top of that, right, you're not going to be able to live in that community. And so the community just ages out, essentially. And there are parts in Utah where that is happening, where, you know, some of these kind of like, I would say, upper middle class communities are kind of like decaying because the young people can't live there. So you need a mix, unless it's a community that is like, you have generational wealth and your kids are going to school, no debt, you know, getting hedge fund jobs right out of school, right? Then it's a different thing. But the other thing is that, you know, if you want to go to a restaurant, there has to be people to work at the restaurant. If everybody in your community is a millionaire, who's going to work at the restaurant, right? So you need a mix. You do need a mix. Now that's different from Section 8 housing. I have to say, Section 8 housing is a different thing, right? But if we had housing like sorted out, Section 8 housing wouldn't be necessary, because the cost of housing would just be reasonable because we're building enough. But the fact is, we just don't build enough. You think it's naive that you wouldn't need Section 8 housing? So right now, they don't build, not very many people build low-end housing, but, well, yes, I do. I mean, when I was a missionary, that's all we did. So I get it. Trust me, Missouri is even more white trash than Florida. Okay, like the poor people that can't afford to live in Florida, they come to Missouri. And you know, we spend a lot of time. A lot of those people that were worked with were not all there. They were not all there, man. It wasn't just that, like, you know, they were born into a bad family situation and they picked up bad culture, and a lot of the people that we work with as missionaries are just like could not really be held accountable for their actions. They were just not all there. It was enough to live on their own, but in a past era, they would probably be in a mental institution. You know? I don't know if I should be really like jumping on board this or not. Was still concerned for some reason. Like, I feel like, okay, yeah, at 3.43 or 4.34, probably I should have done something. Could have made $10 on it. Now that it's gone to $10, I don't know. The cumulative delta is not so clear in the 10-year. Like, it's selling, but it's not overtly. And now somebody puked in the 5-year. Man, you know, one of the problems that we have in the United States is that there's a lot of really complicated problems and they kind of all stack on top of each other, right? Like, you're talking about Section 8 housing. Where should you build? Where should you and should you not build Section 8 housing? Building Section 8 housing in a middle-class neighborhood, maybe not a good idea. Okay, maybe. But I do think that we should, relax the building permits to some extent, okay? But one of the big problems that we have amongst the poor in this country, that the people that are like, what would the word perpetually poor or whatever the deal, a lot of those people have mental problems, and we don't have ways to deal with it in the United States. I mean, the way that we dealt with it before was a mental institution, and then we decided that was no good and we got rid of the mental institutions, but like we didn't do anything in its place. And so this has just kind of been this open problem that's been festering for like 30, 40 years now. Since the 70s, basically. There's another slight and another 5 ticks. I'm thinking that I should have just gone short after the news and I could have seen it, and for some reason I just wasn't feeling it today, I think that I screwed up there. I'm like really weary about like just trying to jump on it here now, but it's like a distribution. On one end there's people with mental problems, on the other is people who just fell on hard times. Well, but the people who just fell on hard times usually tend to get out of it. Like my understanding is that most people that are like homeless or whatever the deal is get out of it, right? Like, this is that The Pursuit of Happiness, that movie. Like, that's an example. Okay, most people that get into that situation do not get a job being like a stockbroker or what, a money manager and become a millionaire from it. Okay, but my understanding is that the majority of the people do eventually get a job and get housing and get out of it, and that there's a lot of resources that are actually pretty effective for those people that are really working hard and are going to get out of it. And so the majority of the people that are what we would call perpetually homeless are people that have mental problems or are on drugs. Yeah. And the solution has been sweep it under the rug, right? Sweep it under the rug until you can't sweep it under the rug anymore, and now all of a sudden it's showing up in your middle class neighborhood, and now it's a problem that you have to deal with. And how do you deal with it? Send it somewhere else? Okay. Because that's what they did here in Utah, by the way. Okay. As they said, okay, we built this Gateway Mall. It's great, but the homeless are too close. It's a block away from the mall, and so nobody wants to go to the mall anymore because of the homeless people. So what are we going to do? We're going to close down the homeless shelter, and we're going to open up multiple smaller homeless shelters in communities. We're going to say, okay, now the individual communities have to deal with it. By the way, those people so I knew this, man, this was rough. One of the places where we had our gym at for a time, basically they chose that area to be the homeless shelter. So like he got kicked out of his lease basically because of that. So that sucked. Okay. And I tell you what, the people in that neighborhood, they fought having the homeless shelter there so hard. Oh my gosh, it was crazy. And it was like the most liberal area of Salt Lake City. Okay. And this is, you know what? It totally is virtue signaling. I totally think it is. This is like the liberals are all about, we need to be kind and we need to do things for these people that are struggling and everything. But then when it comes to putting it in their neighborhood, they're the ones that oppose it the most. Which means that it's all just virtue signaling. Yeah, giving lip service to it, but then when it actually directly affects you, then you're against it. Okay, so they split it up. Guess what? Like, it didn't solve anything. It just spread the problem out. So now you have a homeless problem, multiple spots in the city instead of just in one. You went along there? Oh, that one wasn't too bad. If you're only going for 1 or 2 ticks, I think that in ZB, that one might work for you. Yeah, then when we middle income people start complaining about the same things, it's all actually, yeah. Totally is. I don't know. So I saw this TikTok the other day that really rubbed me the wrong way. I think that part of what rubbed me the wrong way is that to some extent it's probably true, but I think that she just kind of got the details wrong. And it was one of these blue-haired ladies, by the way, okay? It was like blue-haired professor kind of history lady. So of course I'm like, oh great, right? And her assertion was that extreme income inequality precedes the fall of civilizations. That if the income inequality persists for too long, that's when an empire falls. Well, I don't agree with that. Fundamentally, I don't think that income inequality is necessarily a problem. It can be, though, a symptom of a problem. Because if you do have people at the top basically rigging the game in their favor, and against people on the bottom end, right? So that you have this huge group of people that are basically living in poverty. Then you have a problem, right? But, you know, if everybody is living in middle-class lifestyle, that's great. And then, you know, you have a couple of people up at the top end of it that are 100 billionaires or whatever. That just the fact that there's an inequality isn't a problem. It's more about the standard of living for that bottom 60% of people, you know? They'll never acknowledge that the lower standards are, the higher the income inequality, you stop holding people accountable, and inequality persists. Yes, it's true. But that's the thing, right? Is that we can agree, and this is the thing that I think that the left would not agree with. There are some people that are just going to be at the bottom of the heap because, sorry, they're stupid, and you know it could be it could be a genetic thing for some of these people, okay? Like some people just have low IQ. And you could put that person in, and they grow up in a rich home and they would still be low IQ, okay? So what do you do about those people? Okay, because I don't really feel like we have very good solutions for those people right now, right? We just kind of have them live on the street. That's the place where, like, the costs should be socialized, because if you just let that go out in the street and fester, then it starts to affect everybody, and it affects the wealth of everybody. And so it is actually cost efficient to socialize that and to have services to help those people that need help because they're not capable of living on their own, okay? And in some instances, the help would have to be forced. That is to say, they want to live on the street. You know, I don't think that it should be exactly like a mental institution like it was, but yeah, There are some people that they're just not capable of making those kinds of decisions on their own, and they should be put into an institution, medicated, and then their quality of life will be so much better if we did that. Okay. Just saying. It's like I'm listening to Jordan Peterson. Does he say? I don't know if he's ever talked about this particular problem. People in the U.S. greatly overestimate the average pay and also the percentage of the middle class of the total population. Most live paycheck. Well, okay. So can we stop using the term paycheck to paycheck? It is so subjective. Okay. It is so subjective. Most people, like, let me be quite frank with you. If you are not living paycheck to paycheck, you're doing something wrong. You should be saving all of the excess capital that you have. So if you're not saving it away and, having almost nothing left in the bank account at the end of the month, you're not saving enough. Unless you make like over $200,000 a year. Okay? Over $250,000 a year, sorry. Okay. Unless you have over $250,000 a year, you probably should be living paycheck to paycheck. But you're saving away. So that's where it's like, it's kind of... Yep. I mean, the rule of thumb would be, you want to save 10% of your income. So I save more like 20%. Okay, but it is true that people in the US greatly overestimate the average pay. But it's kind of a weird thing, man. Like, so here's what I think causes this, okay? There is like a threshold, okay? So let's say what you saw, I don't know, like if I try and use today's numbers, it doesn't work. Okay? But it used to be that you could make let's say you make $4,000 a month, right? And then you pay like 30% of your income on housing. So you spend like $1,300 on your housing, okay? And then all of your other bills and food and everything, and then that comes down to the you're spending all of the money a month, okay? So now you go and you get a new job and you get a 10 to 20% pay raise. But you don't change anything. You still live in you own the house, you still live in the same place. Your rent doesn't change. Nothing else changes. Okay. Guess what that extra $1,000 a month is? That's $1,000 to do whatever you want with. Right? So once you get to this threshold, that is basically like the American dream, where you own a house and you're happy with your house. Okay. And then you get a pay raise on top of that. All of that capital, you get to save and invest. Okay. And $24,000 a year to go and invest is a lot. Okay. Like, that's going to double and you're going to keep doing it for years. And that grows very, very quickly. And especially if you're doing that like in your 20s, and then your income is just only going to increase. And I think that millennials will find eventually, it will happen later in life, but eventually millennials will find that the time will come, that the boomers will age out, and you will be the most experienced people in the organizations, and you will get paid appropriately at some point because they will need the experience. Okay. So it will come late. And so what I'm saying is it scales quickly, right? There's like, it's rough. Your paycheck to paycheck is, and then all of a sudden you start to get this extra $1,000 a month. And then all of a sudden you start saving it. You start investing it. You start your own business. Like, it just stacks on top of it so quickly. And this is how you get these boomers that, they have so much. Right? And that really, really distorts the curve. So that, the average income in the United States is still like $50,000, $60,000 a year. But like, you go and look at the numbers, like, how is anybody living on $60,000 a year? Right? It seems like nobody's living like that, but it's because the people that do get out of that, they scale so quickly that then, it kind of distorts your perception about what most people are living. And those most people are still kids. What? When we were talking about, what did Jordan Peterson say word for word? What? That some people should be put in mental institutions, basically? Well, like I said, it's problem upon problem, right? Okay. You never resolved the mental institution issue. Okay. Then you have a housing crisis where we're not building enough housing for the past 10 years. Then you have inflation. Then you have a kind of generational change that we've never seen, where boomers are just living so much longer than previous generations and are staying in the workforce much longer than previous generations. And then after that, after the millennials, you get into population decline. Yes. It's a whole bunch of problems all together, and you can't just come down and say, I'm just going to change this one thing and it's going to fix everything. No, it's like super complicated mess to sort out. Know that society had found a solution to that. You know what? On the mental institution, because I wish I was more of an expert in it than I am. I'd say I probably know more about it than the average person, because I had to deal with it as a missionary. But I do not believe that the mental institutions was like an adequate solution. There was some problems with the mental institutions. It wasn't the problem that shut them down. Like, the whole thing that shut them down was basically like the people saying, you get committed to the mental institution, but you're not actually crazy, and they can't tell. It was all based on this study where they said, go to a mental, try and get yourself committed and see if they can tell that you're normal. And they couldn't. Well, it turns out that whole study was faked. Like, the whole thing was fraudulent. And that is basically what they used to close down the mental institutions. Okay, so that kind of sucks. They shouldn't have shut down the mental institutions. But they probably needed to reform the mental institutions, yes. And this kind of comes back to this larger thing, which is what radical change rarely works out well. Radical change in society rarely works out well because society is such a complex system. And in a complex system, you have to make small intentional changes. Many small intentional changes over time. You're always changing one little thing until you get the system to where it needs to be. Because if you just completely overhaul the thing, then it creates more problems than you solve. And that's what you see with the mental institutions. Is instead of reforming the mental institutions and turning them into a good institution that was effective, we just completely got rid of it and then didn't replace it with anything. So that's one problem that I can say pretty confidently that exists and that probably needs to be addressed. How much that plays into some of these other problems, I don't know. Why don't I hold my ZB line? Yeah, I don't know, man. I probably wouldn't have held that. I mean, in all honesty, it's a counter-trend trade. You don't necessarily want to try and hold those on forever, right? Because to get 7-tick pullback is a little bit more than usual. But here's the other thing. The cumulative delta in the 10-year on this retracement is much higher. It's not the case in the 5-year and the 30-year. So because the volumes are not very much in line across them, I'm a little bit wary about like, this is a reversal. I should just take it back to the open. It could happen, but it kind of still seems to me like maybe we're in a range. So like, who was it? Well, somebody was saying, Octavius was saying we might be in the first leg of a meta order. I kind of suspect that if there is a meta order going on here, that it's on the yield curve and not, all of them the same direction. Because it's like you see the flows, but the price isn't really necessarily responding to it. Which is kind of like the opposite unusual situation that it's the market that I grew up in, but it's not the market that we've seen the past couple of years, right? The past couple of years, the market orders are just like incredibly dominant, but we seem to be moving back into an area where there are periods where the limit orders went out, and that's kind of what happened right there. Because look at the market orders. It's a little bit iffy. That big sell here, big buy, that would normally like retrace things all the way back up. So I guess that means that I would still rather go short. But it also does not, it's not enough of a change there. That's like 10,000. That's like 10,000. That could just be noise. And it's just not, there's just not enough auto-correlated order flow for me to be really clear. And I also don't have a whole lot today to suggest to me that like the flows are going to be short. I think that the flows that you're seeing right now are probably more like speculative flows. And when it's a speculative flow, I'm a little bit more cautious about just trying to jump on the trend. Anyways, I don't know. So with that whole discussion, I don't know. You guys, there wasn't other comments on it. I kind of feel like I was starting to be a little bit ADHD, like lost in the weeds. I can go back to one thing, which is like, okay, if there is a problem, better enforcement helps. Yeah, that doesn't solve the larger problems that the left is concerned about, but it does solve the problems that the left created trying to solve that problem in a bad way, right? Better enforcement, yes. But the question still remains, is it as big of a problem as right-wing media is trying to make it out to be right now? I don't know. All I know is that right-wing media really wants me to be focused on this particular thing at the moment. And I have a natural resistance to any kind of narrative setting. I try and game it out. I don't know. I still think Donald Trump is going to win. I got to tell you, like when I think all of our problems and everything that we have, like this is my issue. Okay, I think Donald Trump is going to win. I don't think he's going to fix the things that we're talking about. They weren't things that he talked about when he was running for president. They weren't initiatives that he was pushing when he was president. Like, all Republicans are ever going to do is fiddle with the tax code. I don't know if Republicans are ever going to address or not even healthcare. Like, man, can we get like a well thought out, complete healthcare plan from the Republican? That would help. I hope he would win because of his Ukraine comments. Well, if anything prevents him from getting into office, it's going to be Ukraine, okay? But I think that Donald Trump has tiptoed along that line carefully enough that he gets away with it. If it was Ron DeSantis, if Donald Trump didn't run, and we were all certain that Ron DeSantis was going to be president, okay? Well, of course, he would probably be up in the polls more against Joe Biden, but I actually think it would be closer than we would think. I don't think there would be more than a five-point lead. Then, if we're questioning, will Ron DeSantis actually going to beat him? I think that Ukraine would probably be the biggest issue working against him. Because the majority of Americans support Ukraine, and the majority of Americans, and by quite a wide margin too, support more aid. More aid. So, yeah. That's a vulnerability for Republicans. Which is funny because amongst the people that amongst this base, I guess you could say, amongst the Republican base, they're super anti-Ukraine war. But I don't, well, I don't trust Republicans on this issue, quite frankly, because I continue to see things on conservative social media, like particularly on Patriots.win, that looks like Russian disinformation and meddling. And so I'm not convinced that Republican opposition to the Ukraine war is organic. I think that's one of my big hangups on that whole thing. I'm not convinced that Republican opposition to the Ukraine war is organic. Well, to see us come all the way back up to 10 sure does vindicate my decision to not get involved, doesn't it? Oh, I misread. He's saying I hope he won't win because of his Ukraine comments. But I misread that. Was that to mean I hope Donald Trump doesn't win because of his Ukraine comments? I don't know. So here's the thing. Let's say you elect Donald Trump. He doesn't want to be involved in the Ukraine war, okay? It's not so simple. Even if you're the president, Donald Trump on his own wouldn't be able to end the Ukraine war. Let's take the real extreme view, okay? Let's say that I'm a super far lefty. Donald Trump is actually a Russian agent, and his goal is to become president and then completely stop all aid to Ukraine so that Putin takes over Ukraine. And that's his goal, okay? Wouldn't actually be so easy. Because you can stop the US aid, probably other countries would just increase their aid. Other NATO countries, for one thing. It would be rough, for sure, but they wouldn't just stop their aid, okay? Number two is there's Congress is the ones with the purse strings, right? Congress, in all of these instances, you're talking about getting an authorization and, spending the money and all of that. So if they made a bill like that and then Donald Trump vetoed it, first of all, that would be a very dangerous veto for a president. It would be. Second, but number two, it wouldn't surprise me. It would be tough, but it wouldn't surprise me if the Senate wouldn't try to override a veto like that. There's a real possibility that you could do that. There's probably, you know, between neoconservative Republicans and the entire left, I think you might be able to get to 60 votes, right? So even if Donald Trump like tried to stop all aid and like completely stop things with Ukraine, might not work out like that. Okay. But what could happen, what he could do is he could influence things towards a negotiated settlement where Ukraine gives up some land, which I think would be a horrible outcome. But that would probably be the best case. If you were a Russian agent, that would probably be like your best case scenario, right? The fear, and in all honesty, maybe I've promulgated this fear, but the fear that a Republican would win and then just allow Russia to completely take over Kiev and everything, not a likely scenario. Because the political ramifications of losing a war would be really bad. It's just like why it's for the same reason why nobody before Joe Biden was dumb enough to pull troops out of Afghanistan, right? Or, you know, like what happened with the Carter administration when they pulled out of Vietnam. Like it's so bad for your image. '09. Middle of the range. There's been a bit of a wiggle both sides here. The meta or the amount of buying in ZN has is larger than the amount of selling. The buying was larger than the selling, but that's not the case in the 5 and the 30. The 5 and the 30 are still mostly sell. Yeah, I'm kind of thinking, you know, maybe that initial move down was something that's worth playing, but I'm still kind of seeing a market that is a little bit stuck until the Federal Reserve meeting. They did breach yesterday's lows. They breached yesterday's lows. They didn't breach like the low from Friday. That's at 109.03, and I don't even know if that particular point matters or means anything, but you know, because that was like illiquid market action and all that sort of stuff. But it's just kind of like the only benchmark you really have. Kind of looks like they breached the lows and reversed, but they ran into the liquidity and the liquidity won. And in terms of like, if we were to consider this down leg a leg, that was at 7:07. So we're almost 45 minutes past. So we could. Well, you got 13. Well, that's good. Is that better than what you lost the day before? That's pretty good if that's what you pulled. Anyways, if there is, if this is like a meta order and we're going to get another leg, then it could happen before the top of the hour. But we'll see. We'll see. Was the ones that you told me about, like every one of those, I was like, like by the time you're able to type it out, you can almost tell, right? That it's like, well, you're already getting the buying flow coming through, so it looks like he's gonna make it. It's kind of funny. Let's see here. So I just refreshed Zero Hedge. And one of the top stories is Canadian CPI triggers panic puke in bonds. 5-year treasury yield the highest since 2007. Is it really? Too bad that like nobody trades the 5-year. Forced a lot of trades yesterday. Well, I'm just the trades that you're showing me are like, it would work a lot of the time, but it's not something that I personally could base my strategy on, because when it doesn't work, it's awful. Like, you know, you'll go into this market regime where like it just never works. I've definitely seen that. Definitely seen that. In other words, like, the drawdown on it is too much for me. But you're also making more on it than I think I would be making if I was trying to do that. Because for me to make 13 ticks on ZB was, you know, I usually didn't make that much. I guess I can think of times where I made 16 ticks in a day, but like that was only if there was like a big move. Strategy, I force it. Well, okay, in that particular instance. When you're talking about like scalping, let's say, scalping strategies have this tendency to go into a regime where like it doesn't work at all, and you get a drawdown, and of course, what you've got to do is like try and minimize your losses, but you also have to understand to some extent that like the strategy is prone to doing it. Because that's what I did. Like, you know, at the very beginning, I was just trying to see things in the flow and trade off of that. And I would say fairly early on, I didn't understand what was causing the liquidity hole, but I had a system that worked pretty good for, you know, identifying a place where I could catch a few ticks and stuff like that. But what would happen is the drawdowns were just too nasty. And at first I thought it was me. And then the further along it went, the more I realized that it's not just me. The strategy is prone to it. Pick the lesser of two evils. Yeah, so that's why I kind of moved over to informed trading, catching the swing if you can. There's more variance. There's more variance in my performance, but the drawdowns are less extreme, basically. The tails aren't as big. And overall, I think it's just better for my psychology because, like, you know you have edge, you know, and you can feel confident about it. And when you don't have edge, you don't have to, like, get all over yourself. It's just, oh, okay, well, in that situation, I didn't actually understand. You don't necessarily have to get all over yourself every day. Or did I hold to the strategy or whatever well enough? And so the treasurer going to jump back out here again? It's not going to be very interesting if they push the higher end of this, won't it? Can we set or make a trail strategy in Jigsaw buy one check? Well, so what you can do is if you come in here to this strategy manager, you can open this up and then see there's a couple of different things that you can add. So you can say this one lot, have a trail stop, have break even, and you just set these things up. And then when you come over to your little, oops, I can just close that. And when you come over to your little control here, you know, you can just select the strategy, essentially. Now I just do it all manually because the treasuries move slow enough that I can get away with it. So how much? It's actually still only really. This is actually way tighter than it appears, because that amount of range in ZN is pretty decent, but that amount of range in the micros, you know, because it's basically like, well, I guess it's actually 30. If you had gotten 4.36, which nobody did, then you'd be making 30. But probably where I would have taken the trades, it would be more like 15 ticks. So I'm not actually missing out on that much. But it's come up here awfully quickly, and the buying in the 10-year is continuing, and I'm seeing buying in the other instruments. So now I'm actually getting better signs of meta order long than I ever got for signs of a meta order short. And we're like right at the highs. I don't know if I really want to try this buy the highs thing again like we did yesterday that didn't work out. But, you know, I can kind of see where things are going. By the way, we've had a little bit of a rise in oil, and that is like almost completely retraced. They're still high. They're still higher than yesterday, but oil did chill out a little bit. The Japanese yen is reversing with this treasuries pretty solidly. The S&P 500 has been trading for about 15 minutes and is just kind of going sideways after a little bit of decline in the overnight session. So going into it. Okay, so let's see here. All the key positioning and hedge fund exposure and market levels ahead of the Fed decision. Goldman has CTAs modeled long for 46.6 billion of global equities. Okay. Long short estimate rose 0.38, driven by beta of 0.39 as alpha finished relatively flat on the week. Buybacks volumes declined last week with companies starting to enter their blackout window ahead of next earnings seasons. Sentiment, SPX skews, call skew, put skew, blah, 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 blah. Oh yeah, so flat tape, it's 29 million to buy. Up tape, it's 43, and down tape, it's 25 billion. So they're saying based on the CTAs that there's a lot more CTA flows to go long if it were to happen. That's all equities, though. Might be too much to ask that they show us bonds. Yep, nope, it doesn't. But what we just read there does kind of suggest that the reward is towards going long in the equities right now. Looks like sell at 19? Okay, so let me point something out. Interesting here. 12, there was 28.53. 11 half, they've already traded 14.77. There is 11.78 right there. Okay, but basically we've come up to this high, and there's actually still a lot of trade going on in this area. And that includes a pretty decent amount of activity from limit buy orders. So that is not, in my opinion, super indicative of a reversal. But you're getting strong sell flows against it as well. So it could certainly turn into that very quickly. Yeah. What I think I see here is there is a large meta order to buy, and somebody came in and started selling because we got to the top of the range and the buyer was more than happy to take it. Now, who's to say if there's more to buy out there or not? I don't think I know, especially since I feel like a lot of this behavior they were seeing this morning is probably more technical in nature. And they seem to be reacting really strongly to like previous ranges and stuff like that. So it's really hard for me to come in and say, oh yeah, like this is going to be a continuation, right? Only can say that doesn't look like the large orders are done. And in fact, maybe you're just getting a collision here and the buyers and sellers meet. Buyers and sellers meet and they make, you know, the price is 12 and they just trade until they're both done. Which, you know, it's just, the more I see this, the more I'm reminded of the 2017 market where things were, where volatility was, whoa, okay, so now that's different. That's different. Unfortunately, well, okay. So there was a really big market buy at 12. And so then they immediately bid up 12.5 and like, look, they sold 23.03. So there was like an iceberg behind it too. So that's like a pretty clear level break setup. They came back through 12. Okay, so, and did you see how easily they did it through 12 and the offer's not willing? So that may have created a liquidity hole. That's actually, I'm actually looking at, I don't necessarily want to touch this area now. Okay, I'm going to try the scalp here, okay? Not looking? Well, you can always trade a sim. That's what I do. When I'm not really feeling like I should really trade it live, but I really want to get involved, just come in and sim and see how well we're doing, and then probably this loses and I go, yep, see, I don't actually know what's going to go on. Too much noise involved, but the bet I'm making here is that there is a little bit of a liquidity hole at 12, and so I should be able to get fills there. See if it works. Okay. Might just like reverse here, which would really suck, but that could be what happens. You gotta take a nap. I've never, I guess it's because I do the stream, but I've never been like, oh, okay, I got what I got, and then I leave, because like, what if something important happens and I miss it and there was information that I could have derived from it, even if I didn't trade it. Okay, Jimmy Oreo, he has this tweet that says, fun math poll. If an exchange exists in a major Midwest city and has trade volume of 100 million contracts a day, and a new mayor puts a $1 a penny transaction tax per contract, how much revenue will the city get? Answer A, 1 million per day, or B, 0, the exchange moves. You know what? I'm actually not 100% sure that the CME would move over a 1 cent transaction per contract. I'm not 100% sure they would move. It would be really hard to move the CME. The cost of moving might be more than the transaction tax. Probably what happens instead is somebody creates a new exchange that's not in Chicago, and everybody just starts trading over there and the CME dies. I was probably more likely. Very interesting that they have not been able to get back above 11 now. I kind of feel like that this one is already like gone awry, but... So what should we do? I know. How about we add another contract? Just move to Dallas? Do you think that's where it would go, is to Dallas? It is a really interesting thing to think about, that if like New York or Chicago suddenly became too toxic for exchanges to be at, what state would they move to? Texas probably is a good option. Like, so the thought would be like, okay, so what if the exchange moved to Utah? I don't think that would work, because it would need to be like near a port. How's the drawdown in my live account? So the live account drew down like $200, and I've clawed back about 70 of that. Yeah. It's a little embarrassing to admit that. This is way deeper of a drawdown than I really should have. I'm still incredibly bummed out about it. Yeah, Dallas. I don't know if Dallas would work, though. I think that it would be more likely to be like, if it was going to be in Texas, it'd be more likely Houston, right? Because it's a port. But if the assertion was there needs to be a port, that like really narrows it down, doesn't it? Oh no. Oh, that is so awful. Look, I know we're down, but look, we doubled down and it's going back up. See, it's going back up. See, it's going back up. Oh, don't you just feel like that sometimes? So mom says that he wouldn't get in the car seat. But he is poopy, so we're going to take care of that. take the ball, squeeze it, and that will relieve your stress. Or you can just hold it like that if that makes you feel better. Okay, so we're going back to Dallas is a communication hub. I'm surprised they don't have a redundant site. Actually, I think they do. You're probably right. They probably do have. Okay, let's go check that out. CME backup sites. Backup data centers. Okay. EBS Market and eFix Matching Service Data Centers, Chicago, New Jersey, London, Tokyo. Oh, no, it doesn't look like, at least for that particular thing. The treasuries are moving around a lot here, by the way. That's a little odd. Oh man, the E-mini is just getting toasted here, huh? What was it? They just needed to wait until today to sell instead of doing it yesterday? It's almost break even. Oh, and 10.5 is now the point of control, huh? Of course, yeah. Spent a lot of time there. Well, this could be a while. This next hour might be a slow hour, guys. It looks like it's ready to do something, but that when you get into that situation, this is when it's like you're waiting and waiting and waiting, and like it can be really frustrating. Oh, come on, fill me, come on. Oh, nope. Oh. See, the ZN is interesting. You just have to watch the inside bid, guys. So it's 14, now it's 900. Yay, Phil. Let's cancel this and only do one contract here. Well, I don't know how to rate that trade, to be honest with you guys. So number one, I wasn't there through a good portion of it, so. But, you know, it really went against me at first. So, for what was, you know, a pretty small win. Let's see here. It's saying MAE 3, MFE 2. Yeah, it's not my favorite. Not my favorite trade. I'm gonna give it a C. It did work though. Maybe that means that it should be like a B minus. Hey Keller, how have you been? I'm just trotting around here looking at things. Jim thinks that it costs very little to move because it's just servers and offices. No, moving a data center is not cheap. Well, now I'm to the point where I could just scratch at 10.5 if I wanted to. I'm kind of considering it though. See, now they're like, yeah, we're going to force you to scratch it, Seth. Didn't give you the fill at 12. It touched 12 for a little while, but it just didn't fill me. I guess the prudent thing in this situation to do, it probably is to scratch it. Because I think what's happened is I thought the liquidity hole was going to be at 12. The liquidity hole ended up being at 10.5. I was able to get my average position back to 10.5, but because I can't get my average position below 10.5, it's probably better for me to just scratch in the liquidity hole. Okay. Whew. Oh no, wait. I have 2. Okay. Cool. So how bad was that? Nah, I think I'm okay with just scratching it. Oh, that sounds familiar. I guess McCarthy is speaking at the moment. Okay, so this is another thing that we kind of got going on that is going to be... Well, we'll see if it throws a wrench into the markets or not, but when there's a shutdown, that kind of flows up a lot. We get the Federal Reserve this week and then a shutdown next week, possibly. Could be messy. Well, the change in cumulative delta amongst the 5 and the 30 is kind of evened back out. I should note also that pullback was accompanied by a retracement in the Japanese yen and a little bit of a decline in the dollar. So I can't say that the move that we've had was super significant, unfortunately. I'm still thinking about this whole what if Chicago implemented a financial transaction tax? Would all of the exchanges in Chicago just move? I think that it would take many years for them to move. And I think that a lot of volume would shift. But the thing is I don't know if there's actually a direct competitor for the CME. So it would be a real mess. At the same time, I kind of wonder why I'm not familiar with, any kind of alternative site from the CME. Like, I suppose they could just move to New Jersey. Uptick again. Yeah, this is kind of like going nowhere. I'm kind of thinking that 3K was maybe like just the end of the meta order. Normally when we get an opposing order like this, though, we would have moved up more. So I'm a little surprised by that. I think that kind of shows that there is still a slight bias to the downside. I'm still thinking about this. I still, so it's kind of come through. Oh, I take that back. It looks like I would have gotten filled at 12. I'm okay with scratching it just because it's come into this range where it's not doing anything. I guess if I was a betting man, I could still try and take it from like 10.5 and try and hold it and see if it reaches the highs, but the way that this has been trading the last 30 minutes or so, 45 minutes actually, I would say, kind of makes me suspect that it's over. What is this? Ron DeSantis. Am I not following Ron? No, oh, no, I'm not. Okay. Both the Trump and Biden administrations have pursued a central bank digital currency. I will not, in fact, I will ban it, just as I did in Florida. Central bank digital currency is a massive threat to American liberty. It would allow the federal government to survey all your purchases and control your accounts. It would pave the way to a CCP-style social credit system. That's why when I am president, a CBDC is dead on arrival. Interesting. Jim says this is a big deal. I do kind of wonder. I really wonder. I'm trying to decide how many people actually care about this issue. I don't know. Here on the stream, talking about a CBDC was something that used to get you guys all animated. And these days, when I've spoken about it, you don't really say anything. So I kind of feel like it's an issue that has fallen off people's radar with Bitcoin having, you know, going into a bear market. Whoa, really? YouTube demonetized Russell Brand over unproven sexual assault allegations? Yeah, the 10-year is down at the bottom. Is the micro is the one that I trade live on. $10YU23. The way that it works is with, at least on my platform, is they make sure that it's 3 digits. So for the 5-year, it's 5YY, and the 10-year is just 10Y. But I think my understanding is that the symbol is different on different platforms. There's 12. There could be another leg. If there's another leg, I would expect it to be coming in anytime in the next 10 minutes. We are towards those highs, but I'm not seeing the volume. Well, there was 1,000. It's a little suspicious, to be honest with you. I'm seeing Cat Turd reposting a lot of people about this now. I don't know about that one, man. Like, I would think that so for one thing, it kind of seems like out of the blue, like YouTube doing it. You know, there's this organization that all of these tech companies belong to that they kind of do stuff, and it's like you get blacklisted and they all part ways with you, you know? And that's probably what's going on, and that's bad. But, you know, if they didn't demonetize him and there started to be a movement against, you know, like people started to be like, Russell Brand's a bad guy and you shouldn't be having him on your, you know, I would totally, you know, ban him too. If it was a problem. It's not a problem yet, though. That's kind of, you know, it's a preemptive thing. I don't think that a platform like YouTube needs to be required to host people. But I don't know, man. You know what you do. I think part of this problem is I don't completely trust Russell. So my recollection of him was like, oh my gosh, I can't stand this liberal blowhard. And then he started saying stuff that I like agreed with, and I was like, well, he's right on that one, but I still don't like him. And now it's like, oh yeah, he totally he raped a girl, or there's sexual assault allegations against him. I'm like, I totally believe it. Totally believe it. Even though he should be presumed innocent until proven guilty. You know, there's kind of this problem. So, like, the real problem here, I think, is that innocent until proven guilty is true in the law, but it's not true in the court of public opinion, especially when it comes to sexual allegations. In the court of public opinion, it seems like the public just assumes that you're guilty. And then that creates a problem. So how can the social media platforms kind of abide by that innocent until proven guilty kind of standard if the public doesn't, right? Because if the public doesn't, then it just becomes a problem, and it probably a more and more controversial problem with them until they decide to ban them because it's too big of a deal, right? But it sure bothers me how as a creator you have no rights. Like in a normal world you would have a contract, you know, and YouTube has certain obligations to you, and they can't just cut you off from your revenue stream on a whim. But I don't know, wasn't all of Russell Brand's stuff on Rumble? Like, is him getting removed from YouTube even a big deal for him? Mm-hmm. Well, they're touching 13 again. I'm still seeing some signs of the pressure to the long side, so. It's a lot of time Bitcoin is down. Has been a long time, hasn't it? Seems like it's been a long time. But it's not the first time that we've had a bear market in Bitcoin of this duration. I don't see the correlation between the 10-year and ZN. I've never used micros. Okay, so it's a little bit weird. I was actually explaining this to somebody else the other day, so let me see if I can try and explain it, okay? So the first thing is that the 10-year and the micro are opposites of each other. 10-year is price, and the yield is yield. So they should move opposite each other, right? When rates raise, the value of treasuries go down, and when the rates decline, the value of treasuries go up. So they should go opposite to each other. So if we come over here and we make a chart. Whoa, S&P 500 just taking the plunge there all of a sudden. So I'm going to make a chart of the ZN. And then I'm going to, in the data series, add 10Y. You're going to see that in general, they move opposite to each other, right? Now, one of the things that you might see though, is like, sometimes this one will move more than this one did. And what's happening there is that ZN is technically not actually a 10-year. ZN should, if we're really honest about what's in the basket, ZN is actually a 7-year. And the difference between a 10-year and a 7-year is actually does matter. It's kind of weird, but it matters enough to us that like it can be the difference between 5 ticks sometimes. So a 10-year moves more like a 30-year than it does a 5-year, let's say. And a 7-year kind of moves a little bit more like the 5-year than the 30-year. So there is this slight difference between them as well. So if I was going to do something like, okay, what is the price of ZN? And then use that to try and figure out what the yield on 10Y should be, it would probably be better for me to use TN, which is the ultra 10-year, because that one is actually a 10-year treasury. So that's the difference. Now, the thing is we went down that path one time, and what we found was that, like, I can get on, number one is that there's, like, a basis difference between these. Okay, so what do I mean by basis? When you trade a 10-year treasury, one of the things that you have to consider, because you're going to deliver the treasury on the delivery date, right? Well, one of the things that you have to consider is that there's a cost for holding it, right? And that's what we call the basis. So the big trade that's out there right these days is you go long the bonds and you go short the futures. And then over time, the futures will decline to come in line with the bond on the delivery date. And so if you're able to hold it all the way to the delivery date, then you're able to make money on that basis difference. Right? Okay. The ZN, it rolls over every quarter. 10Y rolls over every month. So over here in 10Y, there's going to be, a basis difference where the 10-year is going to be like, and it turns out to be like 1 or 2 basis points higher. Okay. So like instead of 3.4, it'll be like 3.5 or whatever the deal is, right? So just think about that. 1 whole basis point in a place where you're making or losing a basis point a lot of the time in the treasury, it's like too big of a difference, right? Then on top of that, if you go and you look at like the cash bond market, the difference between the best bid and best ask in terms of yield is almost a basis point. So when you actually come down to it, in the micro 10-year, the liquidity matters more than those sorts of things, because the spread is tighter than what you would get from like the straight calculations. So you really, over here in the micro 10-year, you've got to pay attention to what the liquidity is and know how to pick your price and to interact with it in such a low liquidity environment. You know, sometimes if I think it's going to go, I really, really favor hitting these with market orders. I think that 4.325 wouldn't necessarily be terrible either if this were to go, but I'm a little bit skeptical about it because it's already been up here and kind of been going sideways, and like we're well into where I thought that we would have gotten a large meta order, and while we are towards the high, I'm not getting the signs that I want that there is a large meta order. So I don't, and plus it's really close to my time to go, so I'm not going to take a trade on it, but just giving you an example of, you know, what I have to do. I have to know kind of where the liquidity is and everything, and where I can get a good fill, or where I can try and catch the edge in order to do well in the 10-year. Whereas in ZN, you know, I've kind of got to understand how to play the queue, because if I'm going to get a limit fill, I'm probably going to be waiting for a while. I'm going to be at least 1,000 contracts ahead of me in line. Oh, they did touch 14 there, huh? And 4,000 contracts to 13.5, huh? So there is still some liquidity kind of standing in the way, but the market orders were definitely there in that instance to get those 2 ticks, at least temporarily. Very interesting. But look, they don't hold 13. Somebody's asking me about the stats indicators. I don't know how I feel about them trading 12 again there in ZN. That kind of looks like they kind of made the move, they coaxed the orders out there, and then that was like the end of it, and so now they're puking. It's really curious to me here in the treasuries how often it has been over the last, I want to say almost quarter now, that the treasuries start out by selling and then reverse back to where they were by the end of our trading session. Typical pre-FOMC day accomplished nothing. Yeah, although this one really did have a lot of stuff that made you think that it was going to do something, didn't it? It really kind of had the machinations that, like, people are taking positions. It's, in fact, I think I would go as far as to say that I think that there were large players involved here today. There was definitely somebody fairly large buying the treasuries today. The question is just, why? Because it kind of looks like that there was big players both ways and that they kind of negotiated something. And so I don't know if that's like a hedge or a speculation on what will happen for the FOMC tomorrow. That's why, like, so the issue that I have is like, okay, if we were just straight up selling, you know, like if it was trend down today and then tomorrow the FOMC ended up being dovish, you know, like Powell's speech was dovish, then I would expect there to be tons of people puking, because I know the positioning is very clearly short going into the event, right? But because of the way that this is played out, I'm not 100% sure what the positioning is. I suspect that there might be a little bit of a long bias, but it's close enough that I can't be entirely confident without having some sort of a model that would explain to me how many of the contracts are actually open versus closed and so forth. Sure. Yeah. Do I have a... Oh, I swear I did. Sorry, I was just looking over my stat stuff. Something that I did very, 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 very early on was make these stats, and every once in a while somebody will come along wanting to use it, but I've never really seen anybody go anywhere with it. Like, it works, but it's super crazy hard to actually find a real edge from that sort of stuff. All right, well, they did kind of make another like attempt there higher, but it kind of looks like it was a fake out. Somebody might have got stopped out and you know, pulled in. But you know, you see it come back down. It doesn't look like it's actually really doing anything too useful. Not anything that I think is a really good trade for me, at least. So, I guess it's similar to yesterday. There probably was some opportunity in there for me, but I ultimately did not see any trades and didn't take anything, and I'm okay with that. And I'll be super careful tomorrow too, because you can really screw things up on the Federal Reserve Day. So, but I'll see you guys then. I'll stream twice tomorrow. And in the meantime, stay excellent, team.